Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, Oscar.
Hello, Mimi.
It is another MiOsc episode, and by the time this episode drops, we will have entered the year of the snake and exited the year of the dragon.
Wow.
Do you like that?
You know what? It's a little. Or is that a shout out to like Saturday morning kung fu theater?
Well, no, I was kind of just thinking more like The Last Dragon because, the last year was the dragon.
Yes.
And we just recently watched The Last Dragon with my father, Grandmaster Chan.
Surprisingly, he enjoyed the whole movie.
Surprisingly, he hung in there with us. It was one of the weeks where we were spending a lot of time with him, and we worked really hard at trying to get him to sit still for more than 10 minutes. And it was like the end of the night. We're like, okay, maybe he'll watch this movie. And he was quite amused. So shout out to you 80s friends out there that know what we're talking about. The Last Dragon.
Last Dragon. Great movie.
Show enough.
Best scene in the movie of The Last Dragon is when the brother is tied in ropes and he has to break dance out of the ropes.
I feel like we've talked about this so many times. People are going to think we're obsessed with this film. But I will say, to me, I can't even think of like the best moment, but I just love saying "kiss my Converse."
Oh, you know what I love saying?
What?
Hey man, what it look like? That's my favorite line. All right, let's move on.
So Oscar had this idea for this MiOsc episode as we enter a new year of the snake, and usually we talk about the madness of CNY or Lunar New Year and all the stuff the temple does, but since we're actually recording this pre-Lunar New Year festivities, our first show is actually coming up. We thought, or Oscar thought, we should do kind of a so long to the year of the dragon. Here is all the things that we were going to make a note of.
Okay, yeah, I thought we could do there's always a best of lists, and we're already into January, into the new year, but we can just say, you know what, let's do it for the year of the dragon-ish, in that area, right?
Yes, and a lot of people, you have clients, and for the most part, I guess they show up to work out with you, but mainly they sit there and they ask you about books and TV shows and all these things that are kind of your fun time activities, things you do in your pastime. And even with our students at Kung Fu and some of the instructor team, we often talk about like what's been happening. And so last year, I think at some point, we talked a little bit about some of the books and authors that we enjoy, but we were just going to jump around and start off at different categories. And like you came up with some and I came up with some questions, and then we filled them out independently. And now we will have the big reveal. Wow. Okay. But before I get started, one of the things that we always like to do at Walam, but also as we enter in New Year's, exit old years, is just think about a little bit of gratitude. And I have a lot of gratitude for my patrons on the show, especially a new patron, Michelle Montag. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, but also the work I do. And if you want to become a Patreon, you can do so at my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. So it's almost like All-Star Rock Stars where they just go right into the advertisement. Yes, but there are no real advertisements here. So first question on our kind of best of or notables for 2024, or Year of the Dragon is actually what we're going to say. Okay. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first? All right.
Choose all the categories.
Let's go with the most memorable or best of. Your favorite meal, because as we know, Oscar's favorite thing to do is eat. I feel like there's going to be some double up here on the choices, but okay. And it doesn't have to just be one. I mean, we could talk about food all day. This could be a lengthy podcast, everybody. So get comfortable.
Different subcategories, because this week alone, I've had some of my favorite meals. You made some curry chicken. You made you made two things with curry. It was a curry chicken and a curry shrimp dish.
And for clarity, Jamaican
dishes.
So much different curries here.
Yeah, that was delicious. You made some ramen recently. And I think every meal that you make and I'm sitting and we're eating together, I usually give you a high five. So that's all those meals are my favorite. Favorite meal that we went somewhere to a restaurant was in South Africa.
Yes. Agreed.
By far, this year, the past year, it was La Colombe.
La
It was
Colombe.
amazing.
Agree. So, what was
We talked about it.
what was it that you enjoyed there, since it was so good?
Right away, the service
Yes.
was excellent. The staff, the ambiance, everything there, and then every dish that came out was delicious.
For example.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is it was almost like in sardine cups, and there was some kind
It's
of
a tuna can.
It was a tuna can, and there was like their version of not spam, I want to say, but like it was like a tuna dish, right, or something. It was, I don't know. That's what comes to mind. The dessert was really good because it was like a flour or something. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That absolutely tops my list. So I do enjoy my meals, don't get me wrong, because there's so much love that goes into them. But then if those of you who are chefs out there or even cooks at home and make a lot of meals, sometimes I feel like when you're cooking the whole time in the kitchen or you're putting a lot, you just don't even feel like eating after,
Right.
even if you go into cooking hungry. So that's kind of a bit of a thing for me. So for example, over the holidays, I do this like fancy dinner for my team, and we did a really special ramen that took over like 3 days to make. It was a
Right.
shoyu ramen. And recently, like just the other day, I made a miso ramen, which was like an ounce of the amount of time that it took for this 3-day event. And I do enjoy that, but by the time I go through all those steps, I can't actually sit and enjoy it. So I have to say my my luncheon at La Colombe was
was amazing.
phenomenal, because I also get to just sit and enjoy the food. Because like as the quote unquote chef in the house, you're making food, and I know that my uncle, who had passed away, my godfather, he was a chef in a Chinese restaurant, and he never ate any of the food at the Chinese restaurant. Not to say that the food there isn't good, it's because you see it and you're just day in, day out, and kind of making all of this food, you don't feel for that. He would want like a sub or pizza or something,
Right.
So sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I just want fake ramen, or I want like a bowl of mac and cheese, or I want a grilled
absolutely
cheese sandwich.
ridiculous.
And yet I've laid out this like 5-course, meal for Oscar, where it's like all whole foods, all very fresh, organic, and I'll want like crackers and cheese. So, but I will say at La Colombe, one of the things that really struck me was where they came out with a cart that showed all the different ingredients they were going to be using for the meal. Like that excites me as well as someone who cooks, because
Yes.
you got to see like, here's the seasonal ingredients, but here's how it's going to be prepared. And one of the other fun things they did was their take on charcuterie, where it was these really beautiful pieces that looked like an apple or it looked like a pear, but it was like, some sort of charcuterie meat, or it was a cheese, or it was a apple jam or something like that. Like it was just all very just beautifully presented, because that's not something I do. Like I do gourmet cooking, but I don't do very well with the plating, and it's not as,
Well, you
I'm
don't
not a
put
Michelin chef.
You don't put it all in a cart and bring out and say, "Let me show
Should
you
I
all the
start doing that
ingredients."
for you? Oscar, I need you to sit down. Here's your napkin, and what I'm going to be presenting today on them. Although I did write out a formal menu for my holiday dinner, which I always do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was
Okay.
one of my favorite meals for sure. And then the bread, the little rolls from the Test Kitchen in Cape Town. It was very embarrassing that we ate it in such a way that the hostess thought she needed to bring us more. And this is on top of all the other food we ate. We were so full, but that bread, it was like
It's
this.
like a fried.
Yeah, it was like fried dough, but it was so crisp on the outside and warm and soft and airy on the inside. It was like a little roll, but it had just like this perfect balance of all the things you would want from a piece of bread. My mouth is watering right now thinking about it. So those are, I would say, like top things in my head that come up with a meal that I enjoy. And I will say it's really funny, because whenever I do cook after every meal, you're already like into it, because of course I serve you first, but you're usually
very
going,
important.
oh my God, it's amazing. And then you go, well, what do you think? And I usually say something like, it's tolerable at best, or it's good, it's okay. But there are times where I've been like, okay, this is very good.
Yes.
And I will say the Jamaican curry shrimp that I just made was,
You were very happy with
I
that
was happy
dish.
with it. I was happy with it. Kind of did a new method. So Gotta have that Scotch bonnet, you know? All right, your turn.
For choosing, I prefer you to choose all the categories. Because you're so organized. I don't know. I'm going to get lost.
Okay, so since we're talking about meals, let's jump to, because a lot of our listeners know you come with us on vacation sometimes, but also we travel a lot.
Yes.
And a lot of people are like, what's your favorite vacation spot? But that's a really hard thing to kind of determine. But what is, I guess, would you call out as last year in terms of where we've been? And for our listeners, we did Europe, we did Hawaii, we did some domestic stuff, but we also, I mean, when I say Europe, we did a lot of the Nordic area, Germany, we did, of course, South Africa, as well as Zimbabwe and Zambia and that region. We did a ton of Caribbean cruises. So it's kind of sad because the Caribbean is amazing, but we go so often, it's like driving to, Winter
Somewhere
Park for us.
Or South Florida.
Yeah, so, all right.
I enjoy everywhere that we go.
Yes.
But a lot of the pleasure that I get from vacation is seeing you relax. So I would say Hawaii was really good because I was just us. And when you and I are on vacation alone, completely alone, and also without a lot of activities that need to be done, those are very relaxing for me.
Okay.
Because you get to sleep in, you don't have a big agenda. And so that to me is very enjoyable. So that was Hawaii. And then of course, South Africa was amazing. Going to Europe, all that stuff's super amazing, right? It's activity heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
But still amazing. But Hawaii was one, and then hanging out with Mark Cheng in California because he is a really good friend and took really good care of you. So to me, those are my two favorite
From last year.
vacations from last year.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting because this actually melds into a second category where I kind of cross over with you. Well, as far as vacation spot, I'm shouting out to Arathusa Lodge in Sabi Sands,
Amazing.
South Africa, because it isn't just about the animals and wow, of course safari is incredible, but it's the type of safari where it's like open vehicle. We had some crazy stuff. There's a podcast on it. You guys can listen in, but just the way they do everything from when you arrive to when you leave, it's 5-star treatment, but also very intentional. Their dedication to the animals and also the food and the service. It was just an amazing experience. So vacation spot there. But I also have on our list like kind of most memorable moment or impacting moment. And I have a long list of these because there was no way to pick one. But one of them was where when we get to travel, we really get to spend time with people that have been so important in our lives, but also that we really enjoy spending time with. And I was also going to shout out to Mark Cheng, Dr. Mark Cheng, for those of you who follow him on social media, wealth of knowledge and all the things that he shares about. But yeah, that was one of the most impacting and memorable moments for me throughout last year in terms of our trips. Well, obviously we also ate ourselves. This kind of goes into our meals too. APL barbecue. But just the love and care that we get and literally being able to just hang out and have downtime and spend time
really
with him and
anything.
we both took 1 hour naps in that HBOT machine, which is a hyperbaric, what is it called?
Honestly, I don't know.
Oxygen chamber, high pressure oxygen chamber. I don't have it, but it was able to really have some downtime and also spend quality time with people we love. So that was one of my memorable moments. As well as kind of, in with traveling, not necessarily, this is a vacation, but those human connections. So for me, one of the other moments was being able to teach grad students of mine in Germany. So you forget when you're in your day-to-day at the temple, and of course you're impacting so many humans and it's amazing and you're doing this work, but then to realize, wow, across the world, there's people studying our style that take it so seriously, that have such a love for it. And I did a lecture and everybody was so engaging and so appreciative of us being there.
Right.
Like that was a really nice moment for me as well. And finally, in terms of impacting most memorable moments from last year, I gotta say is the Sifu test, which again, we did a whole podcast on, so you can learn more about that. But that is just where all of the Sifus from all over the world came to Florida during that crazy storm, the hurricane. And we just had such an amazing, intensive weekend. But the amount of love and dedication and just the importance and gravity of what we were doing, and all of it combined was super impacting for me.
Okay, so we're talking about memorable moments then.
Memorable moment or impacting moment from last year, yeah.
So the it's not anything that I would think of. It's something that you would think of doing, and
Okay.
then we do it, and I look back and think of how memorable it was.
Yeah.
Was touring the shanty towns in South Africa, right? So it's
good
not
one.
anything that I would say, yes, I want to do that, but it's something that you're like, yes, I want to do that, and then we do it, and then
And packed our luggage with things to bring
Right.
to the
I'm more of like, yeah, sure, that's fine, but I don't have the thought of like, yes, let's do this, right? I'm just more of like, yep, that's a good idea, let's do it. So, but I look back and reflect and think that that was impactful and memorable, because you get to, one, remind yourself of how fortunate you are, right? Just by looking around, and then realize that this is something that you just know growing up with even a little bit of poverty is just like, not having things does not mean that you can't be happy. Like you can see happiness and joy in all different levels, and in
Yeah.
the same way that you can see misery in all those different levels. And then I guess the other part is that the Wallam Cultural Center is kind of this almost hallowed ground where at the Sifu test and at our instructor Christmas gathering was really two super memorable, impactful times where we were surrounded by people thinking this is really unique and really awesome. So those
Yeah.
are my, yeah.
Though I love that you brought that up too, because our immediate team family that is here in Orlando, I love that we're kind of talking about this too, because they are remarkable. The thing is, every day we drive home, you and I turn to each other and go, man, we got such an amazing team.
Yes.
Those that don't know, our instructor team is, I would say, like, I don't know how to do percentages, but it's like
Well,
99%.
how many instructors do we have?
Let's just call it 20 to make it a nice even.
You
Yes.
and Sifu 2.
Yeah, I guess I don't count myself, but yeah. Are the only ones that are quote unquote employed by the temple.
Everyone else is volunteer.
Yeah. So we have such a incredible team that show up because of love and passion and dedication. And that is like, we get that as almost a daily reminder, but you're right. At the holiday dinner, we had a moment where everyone got to really share how impacting Wallam has been, why they want to teach, why they're part of this inner circle of humans that dedicate themselves to hopefully carrying on this art form, but also teaching. And it was so moving to hear what everyone said, from literally like 13, 14-year-olds all the way through
Late 80s.
late 80s. Like such a diverse team, people from all different backgrounds, walks of life, different cultures and heritages. And it was very inspiring. I
Yes.
agree. It's so nice, and we're not big holiday quote unquote people, but those are the moments that you get to have because of the holidays. You make an effort to say, let's get together because it's whatever, New Year, Christmas, et cetera, all these things. And if we didn't have that, I don't know that we work as hard to take those intentional moments and then have something that we now think as one of the most impacting or memorable things.
So it's sort of like we talked about the last podcast of capturing the energy of the new year to then make new intentions for the year or new goals for the year.
Yeah.
We took advantage of that energy of the holiday time to get together, which is the best part of the holidays, after presents, obviously. But
let me just
kidding,
say,
not kidding.
Oscar loves presents.
I just love opening
for
stuff.
Christmas, I make sure I wrap every single thing very individually, so he always has a lot to open.
Yeah, so like you gave me like juggling balls, and I was like, this is awesome. So anyway.
I should have wrapped each one individually. I'm going to do that next time.
You don't have to, but right. I am not a let's celebrate because of it's my birthday or because it's Christmas but if you are able to then take advantage of that time, energy, whatever, and then you can then reflect back and go, wow, we had some really, really cool memories and moments there. I will say that for as we go through this list, the thing that we've spent a lot of time and energy in is in consuming audiobooks and whatnot, so we should leave that for last. That's my one request.
Oh, I was already going to do that.
See, I knew that. Because you said, what do you want to do next? And now I realize what I want to do last.
Okay, thank you for sharing. You can see we really planned this episode. Actually, for us, this is very planned.
Very planned.
Because I actually
There's
had to
notes.
do homework and write notes, and that's why, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but we've got our laptops out and everything, and our cheat sheet. So most memorable, impacting, but I thought we would share maybe kind of a disappointing moment, or kind of, not to be a downer, and I'm just going to say right now, we're not going to talk about the election, because we already know like that's probably the biggest disappointment of the year. But I'm going to go a little lighter, not lighter, because it starts with me saying I almost died. But, actually, backwards. I got to say, one of the most memorable moments was walking off a cliff with you.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe.
So that's funny because I
Because we
think
didn't
of that
think
as
of that as the number one thing. It didn't come up when I was typing my notes. But now that I'm thinking about almost dying.
It made so that entire trip, the most memorable thing of that trip was that, because we have like video and photographic
Yeah, so for our
evidence.
patrons, you know who you are. You've already watched it. We had our video where we actually showed the whole thing. For our Insta followers, I kind of gave a bit of a teaser, which was also our holiday card, which is literally like my foot stepping off and you knowing there was no going back from that. We were going off of that into that gorge, and it was terrifying. And I have to say, people think that I'm so daredevil-y because back in the day I did stunt work. Back in the day, I would do that literally for work. Like there were times where we had to jump off buildings and do wire work. And now I'm a bit afraid of heights, and I get like anxious and my heart was pounding. And so maybe in the future I'll share it for the general masses, but I know a lot of you saw that teaser, and our patrons got to see the whole thing where I'm freaking out, but that was super memorable. But disappointing wise, or something that was to me that came to mind, because we also didn't want to spend too long on this and go over the whole year of the dragon in review. But when I say almost dying, was actually on that Germany trip. We were on a cruise on the way to Germany, back to Amsterdam, and then we went to Germany. And because on the ship they allowed smoking in the casino, boo. I think I talked about this, actually invented already about this on a podcast, but I got a severe sinus infection, and it became so bad, it just kept ramping up and ramping up. I was able to push through, teach the workshop, do the seminar and the lecture, and then right after that, my entire being just shut down, and I was in that hotel room, and I couldn't breathe, and I was thinking, how am I going to fly like this? And I mean, I'm being dramatic. I didn't almost die, but I was thinking, what if my sinuses explode in the air? I was like texting my doctor. Shout out to the pharmacists in Munster, Germany, who are, not that our pharmacists aren't doctor level, but like they also treat you as if you're a patient when you come in just to the pharmacy. And they really were really great. And but it was just this feeling of misery as I was laying in that room thinking, is this the end? When you're sick.
Well, if you can't breathe, it just shows you the importance of
breathing.
Breathing when you're not able to breathe.
Anyway, that was my downer.
I guess my downer.
Oh, I have one more. But
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say any moment I was injured or couldn't be at my fullest capacity.
Right.
And that kind of carries over to right now, where I won't say I have a major injury, but I definitely cannot do all of the movement things I am required and need to do for my career and life and happiness. And so that's just kind of a constant. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
So similar. Obviously, you almost dying. Big bummer for me if that ever were to happen.
Yeah,
so
I was going to feed you those 5-star meals.
Yeah, everything would take a turn for the worse. But the main disappointments or disappointing moments that I have are based on reflecting back if I have failed in something that I try to promote. So you mentioned injuries. So I love, all types of training. There's the Kung Fu, Tai Chi, the arts of striking, like boxing and kicking and strength training, body weight, barbell, kettlebell. I love doing all those things. And if there's ever a time where I'm not able to do it to where I feel like I should be able to, and reflect back and realize, well, I can't complain that much because I also am able to discuss, which we'll talk about later, all these books and TV shows and songs that I've done. So it's more about realizing that I didn't prioritize so, but the disappointment is shown through maybe minor injuries, like you said, or this is not a disappointment. It's, to me, a lot of times it's inspirational. Is looking at someone like my. It's funny because I consider him my kung fu uncle and my older brother, Sifu 2, at the temple, as just the way he moves. I'm always like, damn, so inspirational, frustrating. But then I reflect back and I was like, yeah, but you know what? I've read so many more books than he has. He's
I'm
put
an
in
avid
time.
reader.
He's put in time doing kung fu. He looks so good doing it. I should probably like turn off the TV and not watch the next,
I think
Eminem video. But
to be fair, he's done it his whole life and started from a really young
yeah,
age. So the foundation is there. And for him at his level of mastery, all he needs to do is grease the groove, which
yes.
means maintain, and
He
keep.
may
And
have a little
because
rust, and he just needs to
his
dust it off.
career is his job is to do that. And that is really his main responsibility. He gets to continue that mastery.
Yes, yes.
Right? I mean,
not
to
to
be
take
fair to
anything,
yourself.
not yeah, yeah. And I don't. I also not. It's not like, oh, woe is me. I'm super disappointed. I just look. It's more of reflecting, going, yeah, I could do these things. And it's the same when, let's say you have this year there's been a few interactions that have been disappointing based on what you thought your expectations of a person when you're having that conversation. And when I get disappointed is because I realize there have been times where I've also failed in maybe expressing myself the right way, taking criticism, feedback the right way. So I get frustrated with, in the moment, I get frustrated with this interaction that just happened and being mad at the other person, but then a few minutes later realizing, oh, the reason I get upset is because I realize I have also, we talk about this all the time, right? Like, the reason you get upset is because you're like, oh, I've also failed here.
Yeah.
And getting upset is part of it. It's like, why am I getting mad? Oh, this is why. So in general, for the year, it's not that something that I spend a lot of time doing, but those are the most disappointing or frustrating moments. And they literally are moments. It's not spending a lot of time.
You don't dwell on anything. But moving on to fun things, we've
Okay.
got music and songs. And I think that I don't stay very current. I actually had to go, what is that?
Songs.
But I will say I have two that come to mind. And again, these were just real top of mind. One is, for you Patreons out there, because this was featured in my scariest moment of last year, is the Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga combo. I freaking loved that song, Die With a Smile. And as soon as I heard it, like sometimes you hear a song and it takes like a few times for you to hear it, but that one you just turn it on and I loved it right away. And on the flip side, I really loved Murdergram too by LL Cool J and Eminem because dang man, they still got it. And as a 90s hip hop, fan, you just kind of felt a lot of that. And even through the 80s, right? You got LL coming through. I mean, there's nostalgia, but also it felt so current. And as someone in that age range kind of between them, you go, yeah, man, we still show the them up, right? So it's really nice to kind of see people still continuing their craft at such a high level when it's sometimes known as like a younger person's game.
Especially hip hop music.
Yeah.
But I guess I'd agree with that. To me, the songs where Eminem is either featured, like that Murdergram redo with LL, or his own album where I think I played his song Toby the most this year, and another song called Fuel. And a lot of times it's just because I got to hear what he said. So those are definitely top of mind. Kendrick Lamar's GNX album is so good.
Yeah.
And I'm not a typical, what you would say, like, oh, I really enjoy West Coast music, but this song this album, GNX, is really, really good. There's a lot of African artists, and I think because we were going to Africa,
The continent.
to the continent, I was like, let me find music from Africa, and there's so much really, really good music from all over that I played a lot this year. And then Omalay is one guy where almost all of his songs, I'm like, I really like his delivery, the smoothness of his voice. the beats in a lot of the African pop and African chill type of songs are sometimes can be repetitive, but because it's in a different language, in a lot of it's like a native slash English mix, it keeps it original for me. So I really like those. But most surprising is this rapper from Texas named Big X the Plug, whose album is so good to me. It's just this really large dude, deep voice. You know, maybe it's because I love Biggie Smalls back in the day.
Yeah, and he kind of gives you a little
gives
of
me
that
vibe.
nostalgia.
And he's around that age, you know, 25 when Biggie was really blowing up. And the thing that I realized with a lot of the younger artists and a lot of those African songs is songs are all under 3 minutes. Some are under 2 minutes, between like 2 and 3 minutes. So you can listen to a whole album of like, I don't know, 10 songs in under an hour, just like boom, 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 boom.
I think there's something to the kind of the brilliance of that because they know we're in such a culture where things are short attention spans.
They've adapted.
But also anytime you hear a song and you're like, oh man, I wish there was a little bit more. Leave them wanting more. And in show business, they always say, right, just leave them wanting more. And if you give too much, but agree. And just to kind of back up to Kendrick Lamar, I have to say, it's not even that the song was this like most brilliant song, but the whole Not Like Us phenomenon and the whole like movement and the whole, I want to say, catalyst for that, and him kind of being as a response to just as a classic battle MC kind of feeling and that whole hip hop culture. God, it was so good.
Well, yeah, it was so good because it
so
just
good.
This has probably just been hashed so much, but it just shows that Kendrick Lamar is a way superior artist than Drake, and also that Kendrick Lamar is really about hip hop and rap culture.
Yes.
And Drake is not. He's a pop artist who's just not at that level and then is upset because he was challenged and then got destroyed.
Yeah,
so
and
sort of
the
like,
thing is, like, take it with grace, and actually, like, kudos to the MC that won that day, like the rapper that won that day, and it was so clear by every single response, he has no connectivity or concept of hip hop culture. Not that I do, but like speaking to people like Jason Chu, my friend, who like is in the culture and has worked in, you just know. Come on, man. Like, that's not even hip hop culture. Like, it's so counterintuitive of what that whole art form is about. And so Kendrick's response was just.
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
Very layered. It was
amazing.
Appropriate.
And I mean, this is he's a Pulitzer Prize winning
poet, basically.
Poet/author, writer, right?
Yeah.
So you can't even.
Yeah. So analogy would be,
be at that level.
Right now, the playoffs are happening in the NFL, and of course you got the highest level teams competing, and there's a way to lose, and some teams get blown out, and then they get interviewed. You know, quarterback, coach, and they're like, no, we have to take responsibility for what we did. Or the same as you see fighters, boxers or UFC fighters. They get mismatched and destroyed. And they go, props to the person who beat me. I was outmatched.
Be a gracious loser.
Yeah.
Bottom line, be a gracious loser.
And
all right.
Drake is just a loser. But whatever. I mean, who cares? Like the 3 people who listen to this, who cares, right? Whatever. Anyway,
we've got hundreds of listeners. I just want you to know.
What's next?
All right, movie, TV series. We actually don't spend a lot of time glued to the TV this I thought would be quick. I have a few. One is Shogun got us through the election period, so I have a little bit of an affinity for that because it's like, and it was so freaking good. I mean, it was so solid, so amazing. Love The Bear as always. Love Shrinking. That one just brought me a lot of joy, a lot of laughter. Somebody in therapy. Therapy is nothing like Shrinking, FYI, everybody, but it is so fun. To hear and to watch, and it's been fun. I love Kristen Bell. She's just so freaking likable, and her show Nobody Wants This is about a podcaster, so I guess maybe I had like kind of a love for that. And The Gentleman was fun in terms of TV shows. And movie wise, we don't watch a ton because it just takes up more time, but the one that came to mind was Fall Guy. As a former stunt professional performer, I absolutely loved it. I think that stunt performers or action design, however you call it, should be getting Oscars, because I just want you to think about what films would look like if there was no stunt performers, and what every other movie right now is an action thing and a superhero thing or whatever, or even a drama where just someone trips and falls down the stairs. Those are stunt performers that do these things, and they do literally risk their lives. There's no joke to this. I've been on set for some very, very serious injuries, and so they just don't get the credit they need. And that film did everything beautifully. It was comedic, don't take yourself seriously, but at the same time, very serious about the theme of respecting what they do in terms of work, and also kind of an FU to actors that don't recognize their talent and just kind of capitalize off that. That's all.
Fall Guy, yes, probably the most fun movie from last year, for all the reasons you said. Wolverine Deadpool movie I just thought was super fun, and I think it was a great way to hopefully like end that trilogy that they did. I thought it was really cool. I mean, as someone who grew up reading those comic books, to have Wolverine put on the mask, the original suit, it was just awesome.
And also the verses, right?
Yeah,
Wolverine versus so and so. Like, you guys growing up, reading those comics would always imagine or be like, oh, when is it going to be in the comic where Wolverine fights so and so? And so that was probably
classic
really cool.
Cover art or things were put in there that you don't need to know, but you look and go, oh, that was really cool that they did that. So it showed that they really respected where all that came from, and also didn't take themselves too seriously. Furiosa, Mad Max story was really, really good as a prequel to the other Mad Max story that came out. Those two Mad Max movies are amazing, and it's unfortunate that they don't make a lot of money, because you need a lot of money to make those movies, and
we want to encourage the making of those movies.
But honestly, we don't also go and support and pay a lot of money to go see a ton of movies either, right? So
we're part of the problem.
Part of the problem, yeah. And then I wanted to mention one that's just weird, because it's not a movie I would ever recommend to a bunch of people, or also that I would see again. But I like the feeling of watching a movie and thinking, what the hell was this? But not in a disappointing way. And that is this movie called Love Lies Bleeding. It was the female bodybuilder. It's just,
I actually erased it from my memory already.
It's just weird. It's so weird. And
because at first I said, "Did you watch this without me?" And now I remember. We watched it
together.
Yeah.
It
was well done.
Completely original.
What's her name? Kristen.
I don't know.
Twilight. Oh my gosh.
But
Stewart.
But it's completely original.
Yeah,
as a story,
I give it.
I respect that.
I give it that.
So
yeah, I wouldn't watch it again. Wouldn't be like, hey, everyone go see this. But it had a moment. It was interesting.
I watched the whole thing and I was like, what the hell is happening? But not in a what the hell's happening click, which we've done before.
We do a 10-15 minute rule now, because we just don't have a lot of TV time. And we want
I just wanted to throw that out
No,
there.
it sounds like we don't have a lot of TV time, but I just named like a ton of shows. So
did you do shows already? No, you just did movies.
No, Nobody Wants This, The Gentleman Shogun.
Okay, now is my time for TV. Okay, for TV shows, sorry. For TV shows, this is just top of mind. I really love Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I don't know if it came out last year or the year before, but it's on Prime. And I think Donald Glover and the showrunner, I forget who was always, she was always talking about the... and then the chemistry between the two main characters was really cool. So as a whole, that series was really awesome. This is a show that I watch on my own, which is Mr. In Between, it's become more popular, even though it ended back in 2021, but it's about a hitman in Australia. And I just thought it was perfect. It was 3 seasons, 20 minutes.
I would see little bits of it here and there. That's Oscar's jam.
And then I just have to give it up to Abbott Elementary for being a under 30-minute show that you could always put on if you needed to feel like just, oh, this is just happy and cool. And it's about teachers, right? Like who are the most appreciated in our minds if we really give it thought, but we don't. So then they're really underappreciated, and it shows by how much they're getting paid and whatnot. Like, and I don't think you can speak to anyone who goes, oh, teachers shouldn't be getting paid more and they're not appreciated more. Yet, even though probably the majority of everyone thinks that, it doesn't change. But watching that show, is a joy. So
Absolutely.
there's a TV show.
Okay, so big category here is books / audiobooks, because let's be real, everybody I think who knows me knows that I
And comic
would
books.
say 95% and comic books, 95% of my reading is audiobook. That 5% is what Oscar just said is going to be comic book, because there's no audiobook for that, obviously, and then you don't get to see the amazing art. So that's my 95% thing. I did take in 116 audiobooks / books last year. So that probably means 6 books and 100 audiobooks. This, I want listeners to realize, and viewers, is how much time I spend cooking and prepping.
That's amazing.
That is my highest percentage of audiobook consumption.
20 Year of the Snake. Let's get that up to 120. Let's get a stretch goal.
Okay, there's so many categories. Let's start with comic books, because obviously love all the comics and comic book creators out there. I am so behind. I had to go to my story graph and look up and go, what comic books did I read? Of course, the ongoing ever-loving saga is always going to be amazing, and by BK Vaughn. But in addition, his web comic, which just wrapped, Spectators. Wow, if you want to feel very uncomfortable and
I gotta
at any point in time want to make sure you don't get caught reading something in public, Spectators is for you. Do not read that in public. People will totally judge you, but I don't know why. You really shouldn't get judged for that, because it's awesome. But got to give it up to, Lunar New Year Love Story by Jean Luen Yang and Li Wen Pham. I have to say I'm a bit biased because I did consult on that. And it was also, just for those of you who don't know what it's about lion dancing and the love
Like your shirt.
and a relationship, like my shirt. And it is just a really sweet kind of YA graphic novel. And also, I realized last year, and I don't know if it came out last year, but what I did consume as well was Catwoman Lonely City by Cliff Chiang, who is phenomenal in so many other ways. Artist on Paper Girls with BK Vaughn, but also obviously a creator in terms of writing and artwork. His Catwoman Lonely City was just like a one-off graphic novel. I think it's a couple issues or volumes, and it was so enjoyable to me, because it is not your, agile Catwoman, sexy suit, what you think of. It is post having her come out of jail after a thing, and she's a little bit older, like I want to say 40s, close to 50s. She's feeling her joints as she's trying to get back into the swing of things, and it's very much the aged superhero journey. And Cliff, who is also, I'd like to say, a friend of mine, has done such amazing work in the past, but also helped with one of my AAPI projects. And it's just, it was so enjoyable because it felt relatable, where a lot of superhero comics don't usually feel that relatable, except if you're the underdog story. But in terms of like you really feeling like you could be a superhero, this one connected for me.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, for sure I reread Paper Girls last year, even though I read it probably 2 or 3 times. So I love that story.
Yes.
But I didn't read that many comics last year. So the only thing that came to mind that I truly enjoyed and thought I have to read it again from the beginning is James Tinian's Something is Killing the Children.
Yeah.
It's just consistently good.
Yeah.
Just consistently good.
And unique.
Yeah. And so that is really for comic books.
Yes.
What I can say is what comes to mind. Other than that, it's rereads like Paper Girls. Yeah.
So you're the one that has all the different quote unquote book categories here. So I'm
Okay.
going to kick it over to you
So
as we wrap
first
this thing up.
category is, I think we should do fiction. Well, fiction is your main category. Let's go with nonfiction. I have a few to go over. So
Okay.
nonfiction, I got into. This can translate into podcast as well, or do you want to have that somewhere? It doesn't matter, right? So
Yeah.
I
There's no
really
rules here. This is the
got
MiOsc
into
podcast.
Cal Newport more.
Okay.
I reread Deep Work, but his book, Slow Productivity. And I don't know if it's necessarily the book, but it's that in conjunction with his Deep Questions podcast.
Okay.
Just spoke to me a lot more this year of reinforcing the type of life that I want to live which is this deep life of like trying to be really good at a certain thing, which is the Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and then thinking of like how you can organize your life around that. So I would say Cal Newport stuff is really good. I really got into. He's an author, but he also has a podcast. His name is Bart Ehrman, and he's written many books on religious histories, specifically Jesus and on Armageddon and books of the Bible. But his podcast, Misquoting Jesus, I really love because he is talking about the historical Jesus. So it's almost like a history podcast, right? So I love that.
Which we know you love.
Bill Maher's book, What This Comedian Said Will Shock You, had me laughing out loud sometimes.
Yes.
And also, I don't want to disparage any side of the political spectrum, but realizing that when you go too far in every direction, it becomes comical. And he was quick to point that out.
Has always been quick to point that out.
Obviously, quick to point that out. And
which is why we're exactly where we are
kind of
at
where we're
this
at, yeah.
moment. And I have to say, I enjoyed this book, but it was also too painful for me. So I was it got me a little bit angry because it kept bringing me back to where we're at, but it was very good, obviously.
To me, it reinforced like, okay, there are times where you think something of the other team, right, immediately, and then you should always kind of still reflect. And similar stuff that we talk about is like, well, what are we doing on our side? But the cool thing about Bill Maher is ultimately he made fun of both sides, and he goes, but we all know like there is one side that are a bunch of psychos like that are really wrong in a lot of ways. So I'll leave it at that for that. The segue exactly with that, which is sort of reading, is this newsletter called Tangle, which to me I've been enjoying because this writer puts out news where he says, here's what one side is saying, here's what another side is saying, and here's my take. And that has allowed for me to, in this crazy time where we're bombarded with information that is meant to kind of get you very emotional, when you say, well, here's what one side said, here's what the other side said, here's my take, it kind of dampers the feeling a little bit of like getting too agitated, which I'm really all about. And then for nonfiction, the last one is the scariest book I've read ever, called Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson, which is a dramatization of like what could potentially happen during a nuclear war. And it made me think, holy smokes, it's just so scary. So that's nonfiction.
Okay. So I did read some nonfiction. I was very happy to go back on my story graph. And, while you get these bar graphs and it was like, comedy or romance or whatever, it was like really long. And then like the little nonfiction bar, it was pretty small, but I do read some nonfiction. So I picked out a few. One was Burn Book by Kara Swisher. And I didn't have a lot of connectivity because I'm not in tech, but I just freaking love
voice.
Kara Swisher. And I love that she read it in the audiobook because she is just a badass. And I respect her approach in a world where, of course, it's male dominated and everything, but I just respect her honesty. And that also kind of doubles into podcast as well, because she interviews people, she's hard on people, but she also is very open and honest. Like some people like, oh, well, she's a bitch. I'm like, would you say that if it were a man? But also the way she approaches things is just very, to me, genuine. Like that is who she is.
She's not unkind.
She's not
honest.
unkind, and she's very, apologies if she's direct and honest. Right. And I feel like I can relate to her a little bit. Right. And so I think there was that.
Good choice, yeah. And
so I picked that because I really enjoyed it. Like the first 2 minutes already where she's kind of just opened up, I go, oh yeah, man, I really respect this author and journalist and creator. And so that's one. And then one that kind of broke my heart a bit. And it was, I like to kind of sometimes try to intake books or information that I am very, very novice or a neophyte. I don't know much about, and I know this is wrong. My therapist. I feel like I should, or I feel like, God, you've heard about this, but you feel like you should know more. And it's I Am Malala.
Oh.
And that was
the girl who got shot.
Yes,
and that school, right?
Yes, and that was. You know of her, of course, you've seen her. We've actually been on cruise ships where she was like the godmother because so much respect for who she was, her strength, her all of it, but it just also humanized her. She's not just this person that's, survived this amazing thing from a country where, women are second class citizens, et cetera. It's just also like, it was so humanizing because it's her voice speaking as when she was a kid, like just as a schoolgirl, like you can feel that human connectivity to someone that you look up to in terms of like as an activist, as an advocate, as someone who speaks out. And I always love that because anytime you can humanize people and feel any kind of empathy is good, but I enjoyed that, but it is not like an easy emotional read, I would say. And I feel like sometimes, very rarely, because for the most part, my reading, I want to take me out of reality and I want to be in an escape and I want it to be just happy in my brain. That's why I take in the TV shows I do sometimes too. It's like, but I also sometimes feel like I need that feeling of realism where I feel a little uncomfortable and I have a look, it builds that empathy, but it's a good feeling, but it's not comfortable. So
Maybe it's not pleasant, but it's good. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Correct. So that's my nonfiction.
Okay.
So I can sound very, I'm a sophisticated reader.
You're just too good.
Not at all.
Okay, so for fiction, I'm gonna actually just start off with a book that was a big disappointment.
Oh, okay.
Because there was this best books of the 20th century list that came out.
Oh yeah,
and in the top 10 there was one.
And tried.
There was I tried a few and I was like, nope, not for me. But like on that top 10 list was a book called Never Let Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I know that I pronounced that incorrectly. Apologies, but I was just like, it's not a long book, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna keep listening, and I kept going. This is gonna get good because it's on this.
It's on this list.
Then it's like it wraps up, it finishes, and I was like, I can't recommend this book to anyone. For me, even though I think I'm joking here, but I'm just too stupid for that book. It's maybe got too many layers.
And so here's the thing too, like we're not trying to be negative, like, oh, this is a bad book. It just wasn't for you. And I think that's the thing about art, everybody. Just because we don't like something or we like it doesn't mean it's going to be on your best of the Year of the Dragon or anything like that. I think that's something where we're not here as like, oh, we're endorsing or saying you should or shouldn't, etc. But I feel like when people share their points of views, there's this immediate judgment of, well, what are you saying? You're saying like that's the right answer. And I feel like in the younger generation, we get a lot of this where they think it's such a right or wrong thing. I'm like, hey, just so you know, you can love this book and I can hate it, and that's okay. And I feel like that basic principle of us understanding that we are not all the same and we don't all like the same things and that we're going to be okay and that we can still be connected through that is so important, but so easily forgotten. So I hope when listeners and viewers see and hear this, they're either connecting with us on one level or going, oh, wow, that's cool. I mean, that's their take on it. I hated that book, or however it goes.
It'd be amazing if someone's like, how dare you, F you, man. That book is the greatest.
Also, the only thing I will say would be like, F you if you're like, don't ever go to Cape Town or go out of the country, because honestly, see the world. It will open your eyes. And like, I think that there is a right or wrong in that regard, at least being able to expose yourself to things, whether you enjoy the cultures or the foods. Like, it may not be for you, places may not be for you. I think keeping an open mind is what's important here. I didn't prepare for the disappointing, but I did pull up my story graph, and I feel so like bad, like saying, okay, these were the books I didn't like. So I will say there was a long list of I bailed. I'm not even going to go through those because it's really not fair if I didn't finish the book. I will say what really irks me is when I don't want to use the word hate read because it's strong, but when I push through something that's 3 books long, like I'm why would I do this to myself? Like, that kind of bothers me. And so I really wanted to love it, but then I also understood that this author wrote this as like I don't know, fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, like very, very early writing. And that was the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang, because I loved Yellowface. I thought that was really smart and obviously really acclaimed and everything. And so I pushed through these 3 books. And the worst part is when the books are like over 600 pages, that's an investment and that's time I can't get back. So I think it's less about, oh, I didn't like the books, as much as why did I push through something to get through a trilogy? And I've done that more than once, and I need to do my 10 or 15 minute rule, like TV shows, whatever's the analogy, whatever's the comparison to that, because I feel like it was a waste of time to just push through something that I didn't really enjoy or get that much.
Yeah.
Because I want my reading to be enjoyable as well, and
Well, there's so many
not just educational.
there's so many choices
Yeah.
now, and you know, we've been in book clubs. Like there was that Jade series, which I look back and go, man, what a waste of time. You know, I really
Again, because they're so long.
well, they're so long, and it just
It'd be one thing if you read a comic series and
Yeah.
you're like, you know, it's 20 pages an issue and it's really quick. You don't feel the same.
But the benefit to it was that you were doing it as a group.
Yeah.
In that case, and so even though there's the waste of time, like wow, I thought I wasted my time with the series, but at the same time, okay, you're doing it because
That was not our
you
thing.
respect other people, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. So
Okay, moving on.
moving on to now recommended books. So first is The Cemetery of Untold Stories. El Cementerio.
Recommended? What do you mean by that?
Favorite fiction books,
Oh, okay.
right? Is that what we're doing?
Okay.
We're doing that now, right?
Oh, well, you just said recommended, so I didn't know what that meant. Sorry.
But do you want to do favorite fiction
Yes,
books?
let's go for it. We're wrapping up now.
El Cementerio de los Cuentos Sin Contar. The reason I like this as an audiobook was because it's written by a Dominican author, and the narrators are Dominican. So it's female author, so it just reminded me of my mom and my aunts speaking as a
So
kid.
for our viewers, Oscar is of Dominican descent.
So, and little sayings, you know,
Yeah.
like that you heard, like colorín colorado, cuento está contado, like little things where you just like, oh, okay. And so I remember finishing that book, then going on a walk with my mom and speaking to her and going, wow, my Spanish is like on point today.
Yes.
And with the Dominican vibe, which it's like you grow up that way, but it's just like anything else. If you don't sharpen that sword, it gets dull, right? Two books that were fiction that I really enjoyed, and the reason I enjoyed them is because they were short and really well written, in my opinion, is Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, which didn't come out last year, but I read it last year because it's just, there's so much in that book, and he doesn't go into details for a lot of the abuse that these boys have, but you know it's happening, but he writes it in a way where it's not explicit, but man, you know what's happening, and he has a nice twist at the end where you're like, oh, that was kind of really cool. And then a book that I think I recommended to you, which I remember you didn't really enjoy, was by an Irish author called Small Things Like These. It's like, as an audiobook, if something is 3 or 4 hours long, that's a short book.
Yes.
But the reason I really loved it is like there was no wasted words. So I don't read poetry, but I equated it to like reading poetry.
Okay.
And it was just this short story that you finish it, you're like, wow, that was... And then lastly, the series that I read last year, which I read 9 books of a fantasy series, which, listen, I don't read fantasy.
You do not
But
normally read fantasy.
Freaking love the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie, which starts off with this book called The Blade Itself. I started it and I finished. I just had to keep going. And maybe it's the action, the violence. You know when you start a TV show and it goes, violence, foul language, nudity. I go, yes, this is going to be awesome.
Those aren't trigger warnings. Those are recommended. Those like reinforce
Blood
Oscar's
and gore.
desire to watch something. Other people it could be a trigger warning. For Oscar, he's like endorsements. I love it. Okay.
So that series, there was a trilogy. There were 3 other books that are self-independent stories, and then another
In the
trilogy.
same world.
So 9 books total, not short books, because you read the first trilogy. But yeah, that's my fiction recommendations.
Okay, fiction recommendations. Okay, so I also read the trilogy. It's not going to be on my like, oh, these were my favorites out of what I've read, but I did enjoy it. And I will say that is one book where I dropped it because I wasn't in the mood. And this is the thing about reading. I feel like you have to be in the frame of mind, and that's why maybe I'm not often in the frame of mind for nonfiction as much. I have like 2 in my queue right now, but I need to be there. I need to be ready to absorb, and I almost feel like learn, right? I need to kind of be able to have like my learning on versus my, I'm in taking this for enjoyment or something. So I did enjoy the First Law series. I ended up picking it back up and was able to get through it and enjoy it. And one of the things, like you mentioned, that's enjoyable about taking in this, and sometimes people take books as something very personal, like it's their journey and exploration. They take it in, they are like, yeah, that was for me. I just needed entertainment for my personal. I enjoy the act of being able to discuss books. I do enjoy being in book clubs and having someone who also read something to be able to kind of share that experience. And so because of that, I did enjoy it, that we were able to talk about it and the characters and things like that. So I would say when I looked at my story graph, I'm like, oh, this is easy. Let me get the answer to this question. It's like, well, what did I give 5 or 4.5
Right.
stars? And like that, it made it kind of easy. And one of the books that was in kind of the top reads, it wasn't a comic or something, was Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. And I just really, really enjoyed that. I do take in and read a lot of love story, romance, rom-com, period romance, and and I enjoy those. And I used to be really embarrassed about it, like, oh, it's not nonfiction, or it's not a memoir or something that feels very, I'm taking in all these books. And recently, and I feel really bad because I should have written it down, there was a few authors that just call shit out in their books that say, why do we have to call this a guilty pleasure? Why do we have to say something that we are doing where you're reading a book or any quote unquote type of book is less than anyone else? Like, if you're able to craft a story, regardless if it's formulaic or regardless if you know how it's going to end, because here's the thing, and this is one of the rom-com writers, right? You're like in an agreement with an author when you pick up a romance or rom-com that it's gonna end happy. Like, this is an agreement. Otherwise, it's not a romance novel.
Maybe you should read a Korean romance
There's
novel.
that's not a romance novel, right? So there's an agreement between you as the reader and the author, and they know this. But how much more difficult is it to tell that story that you know how it's going to end and make it gripping and make you still go through emotions and make you still feel like there's risk and make you still feel like something's not going to end well? Because otherwise, it is just, well, if that's how it ends, then who cares? And this is the whole, okay, is it the journey or the destination? But I remember Greg Rucka, amazing writer, one of my favorites, talked to me about how much easier it is to write a villain character and their story and things, because there's so much there. It's so much harder to write Superman because he's Superman. It's happy. He's the hero, and writing those arcs are much more challenging. So I shoot down that I totally don't feel embarrassed anymore about my love for these books. One is I need to feel happy and feel what I'm taking in brings me joy, because there's so much darkness out there in the world. I don't need more of that, right? And I will take in some books that are super serious. So one of them was like The Change. I would consider that a little bit not a romance novel. That was a really good book that also topped the charts for me. But anything by Emily Henry, Christina Lauren, Ali Hazelwood, or Abby Jimenez, thank you for getting me through 2024, which was an emotional roller coaster headed towards the end of the year, which we kind of foreshadowed and knew was going to be difficult. And I would say those authors and those writers allowed me to have some sanity. And so I appreciate that. And I enjoyed that. So
Well said. I think the language portion is true, like saying guilty pleasure. It's not that it's bad, but reframing it is super important, and you can take maybe that advice towards 2025. So
the year of the snake.
the year of the snake. So if we were to fast forward a year from now, and you were to say, what's something that you would like to be on this list? Maybe we don't know exactly what the action is, but maybe category. Is there anything that comes to mind? Like for me, one of the things that I started off the last year of the dragon with was asking this question. It was like, what do I need to say no to more? And the one thing that I am proud of, that for out of 12-ish months, maybe I did it for 9 months, was shutting down at 9 p.m. Shutting down as far as TV's off. I'm going to go do my job, which is clean the kitchen and get ready for bed. And so if I look forward to, let's say, a year from now, us doing this again, is I would hope that we have a list of a lot of things that we really enjoyed. Maybe also because this is me personally, I was able to say no to more things instead of always being like, oh, and I want to do that, and I want to do that. Like finding the right balance for that.
Yeah.
So.
A blog post I recently wrote for my patrons was kind of my pledge to be, and this was also episode number 1 of this 2025 New Year, saying goodbye to 2024, was saying no to, I guess, more work, right? So just being able to allow myself, like you said, more enjoyment in terms of that day to day. But that maybe mean less podcasts even, right? Because this takes a huge chunk of our day and everything like that. But I do enjoy this and I do enjoy the conversations, but maybe not being so OCD about like every week having to have a new episode. But with that, we didn't talk about favorite podcasts. I mean, you kind of did. I obviously...
What my favorite podcast is this podcast called the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. It's number 1. As soon as it comes out.
Well, people ask me, and I've been a guest on other podcasts where they ask me like, well, who's been your favorite guest? And I will never really kind of say anyone other than Oscar, of course, because MiOsc is the best. But I want to say last year we recorded a few that were really important, and we kind of talked about being able to get back and chat with Dr. Mark Chang in person. So the fun thing for me has been in this last year, we traveled, and while it was still kind of work, we did some in-person podcasts, which were really special for me to be able to sit, with human contact and be in the same room as people that I enjoy. And one of them that was really special too was meeting up back with Ron in Lahaina, speaking to him 1 year after the Lahaina fires, and just being able to have that magical moment of filming on location, but seeing and checking in with someone that you spoke to during this horrible tragedy. Yeah. And of course, we're so concerned right now while this is being filmed about everybody who is losing their homes in LA or know people that have been displaced and having all these hardships. It is heartbreaking. And so we hope to be back in LA this year, actually, and be more connected. So one thing that I really loved about this podcast in particular was being able to connect with people in person. And I have to say, one of my favorite podcasts of last year was I got to talk to Jim Lee, and that was super cool.
Listen.
I mean, it's Jim Lee, everybody.
16-year-old Oscar, 15, 13, like thinking that you're speaking to Jim Lee, that's awesome.
Yes, I mean, and I feel almost guilty saying it because I happen to be BFFs or friends or very close to so many incredible comic creators. They're unbelievable and actual friends of mine now. A lot of them that have been on my go to get them on my podcast, please list. But you got to say, Jim Lee is so busy in his role at DC as CEO and everything. So the fact that he took the time to talk to me was very kind, because it was also centered around the Asian American and Pacific Islander history project I was working on, and just advocacy for that, and the fact that he participated in the project. And so all of that combined was kind of part of it. So I enjoy this podcast, promise to bring you more. This is a really long one as we wrapped up the Year of the Dragon. Thanks to my favorite co-host of the MiOsc episodes. And let's see what the Year of the Snake brings.
I think it's going to bring Lazarus. I'm just joking. No pressure. All right, let's wrap it up.
All right. Bye, everybody.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.